On July 18th, experience extraordinary music under the stars. Join Madison Opera for Opera in the Park, a free concert in Garner Park featuring the best of opera and Broadway. Opera in the Park 2026 takes place at 8 p.m. on Saturday, July 18th. The rain date is Sunday, July 19th. Pack a picnic, gather your friends, and join Madison Opera to celebrate 25 years of this magical night. Learn more at madisonopera.org. This is CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Today, the August primary is just 5 weeks away. On the Democratic ticket, there are 6 hopefuls in the running. Voters in the Democratic primary will decide who will go head-to-head against the top Republican candidate in the race for Wisconsin governor. Joining me today is one of the Democratic gubernatorial candidates and Wisconsin State Senator Kelda Roys. Kelda, welcome to CityCast Madison.
Glad to be with you, Bianca.
Yes, glad to get these conversations started. And let's start with the basics. Briefly, why do you think you're the best candidate to be Wisconsin's next governor?
I am running for governor to raise wages, lower costs, fully fund our public schools, and to protect our freedoms from this dangerous authoritarian regime. I have been standing up to bullies and billionaires just like Donald Trump and Tom Tiffany for my entire career. And I am the candidate that has shown an ability again and again to turn progressive ideas into law in the toughest of political environments. We are moving from our goalie era to our governing era, and we do need our strongest, most effective fighter as governor to seize this moment and make the transformational change that all of us deserve.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about your experience and background. So you have served in the state legislature for about a decade. You've served as a member of the Assembly from 2009 to 2013 and currently represent Wisconsin's 26th Senate District, which covers much of Madison, the heart of Dane County. This experience means you're no stranger to being in the minority in the state house. With the state's relatively new legislative maps, the Democratic Party has a chance to secure more seats in both the Assembly and the Senate. So if Dems were to gain, say, a trifecta, what sort of legislative items are you hoping could get through?
The most important thing we can do to address the affordability crisis is to raise people's wages. I want to see the minimum wage increased, and I'm the lead author of the bill to bring it up to $15 an hour with a path to $20 by 2030, and to restore collective bargaining rights for public and private sector workers. Wisconsin's wages have lagged behind our Midwestern peers, and it has everything to do with the way that Republicans failed trickle-down economics, and their divide and conquer policies have made it harder for everyday Wisconsinites to make ends meet. I also have detailed plans to lower the cost of the biggest ticket items like housing, healthcare, childcare, and utilities, which folks can find on my website, keldaroys.com. But all of those are really, really important. We need to expand voting rights, protect reproductive freedom, and do everything that we can to address climate change and to fight against Trump's authoritarian regime. There's a lot to do. And of course, we've got to make our schools the best in the nation.
Well, so on the flip side, knowing divided government, if Republicans do maintain control of the legislature, how would you work with their leadership to get things done? And for real, like, how does it work? How do you make it happen?
For real, I'm the candidate that's shown an ability to do that. Again and again, Bianca, for over 20 years. I've spent the majority of my career actually as an executive in the private and the nonprofit sectors. But in every role that I've had, yes, in the legislature, but also as an advocate, also as an attorney, a small business owner, and just a citizen, again and again, I have been able to build big, broad coalitions, work with Republicans in this very challenging political environment we've had here in Wisconsin to turn progressive ideas into law, to make law. I've helped to expand healthcare to 80,000 previously uninsured Wisconsinites. I've passed criminal justice reform. I helped to pass the first reproductive rights legislation in 30 years through an anti-choice Republican-controlled assembly. There's no other candidate in this race that can say that they have been able to effectively make laws and wield power again and again, as I have for over 2 decades.
So are one of those accomplishments, or maybe more than, specifically bipartisan, something that you worked across the aisle? Can you just specify that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think everything that I just talked about is
Those are
bipartisan.
all,
There's
yeah.
only one session in the last 25 years that we've had a Democratic trifecta. And that was not like unicorns and rainbows. That was actually really hard because we had such a narrow majority and we didn't have the same kind of ideological consistency in each party, right? There were very conservative anti-choice Dems. There were, some Republicans who were not completely anti-union during, Act 10 days. So it was very challenging to get things through in that environment. And I foresee that even if we do have a Democratic trifecta, it's also going to be challenging to navigate it. That is why having a governor who is confident in what she wants to do, doesn't need to, put a finger in the wind to say, hey, I don't know, should we have universal paid family leave or is that too risky? No, we're going to do it. We need a governor who's ready, knows what she wants to do, and is willing to use power to get it done because we see what happens when Republicans get power. They use it to hurt us. They use it to strip away people's rights, our economic security, to line their own pockets with massive corruption. We cannot afford to let this opportunity pass us by.
Well, Kelda, this isn't your first rodeo running for governor. Folks might remember that you ran back in 2018, and in that race, you ended up coming in third of 8 Democratic hopefuls, and the winner of that governorship was Tony Evers. What do you think, if anything, is different for you this time around, and anything you learned from that experience?
Well, that was a great experience just traveling the state. But, I had a toddler and a newborn, and I wouldn't super recommend trying to run for statewide office when you're being woken up like 6 times a night. So I will say it's definitely easier now. And of course, at that point, I had been a 2-term state assembly rep, but had been out of politics for 6 years. I was running my own small business. I, of course, have always kept volunteering on campaigns and raising money for candidates and recruiting candidates and doing the work that activists do, knocking doors. But I hadn't been in the public eye for 6 years when I ran. But I was so incensed by the first Trump administration and the fact that Roe v. Wade was going to be overturned. I foresaw that. And we had 18 Democrats at one point running for office, but the only woman of note was not pro-choice. And that was just totally unacceptable to me. You had a stage full of men and the one woman was not pro-choice. And I was like, well, this can't stand. So let me just bring my newborn and campaign for governor. And so I ended up actually, I think, outperforming any reasonable expectations one could have had. And now, of course, I've spent the last 6 years in the state Senate. I do have the most experience of any candidate in the race. I've served on the Joint Finance Committee, so I know the state budget process intimately. I know the state agencies. I am ready to go on day one in a way that I think no other candidate in this race has that depth or breadth of experience and public policy knowledge.
And what does that, your identity as a mother, how is that playing into your campaign? Like, I feel like you're really bringing motherhood forward and like mighty, mighty women who make it happen,
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I have a lot of different identities. Obviously, being a parent, I'm the mom and stepmom of 5. So not really many minutes go by where that's not front of mind for me because my kids range from 25 to 4. And so those issues of how can we make our schools the best possible places for our kids to thrive? The cost of childcare, oh my God, we've got to get this under control. Housing, how to help young people get the jobs that they need, move into higher education so that it's affordable and we're not rationing it based on your wealth. With the world sort of collapsing around us, these questions are very potent for me as a parent because I am so motivated to give my kids a better world. And what I see, of course, is the horrors of this regime in 16 years of failed Republican policies that have really held Wisconsin back. And now, a once in a generation chance to fix it if we don't screw it up. If we don't screw it up.
Well, you gained national attention for the ad showing, breastfeeding. You're like, this is an
Mm-hmm.
important part of who I am and also the policies that I stand for.
Yeah, I am who I am. And I think there are always going to be detractors and haters. But to me, the important thing is I show up, I listen, I listen to people who disagree with me. When you treat people with respect, I have learned that they will actually vote for you, even if they disagree with you on some issues. And I learned this working early on as the executive director of NARAL Pro-Choice Wisconsin, traveling around to conservative Wisconsin communities, talking about abortion, talking about sex education, birth control, right? Going on Christian radio and Fox News to just have dialogue with people and to try to give an articulate point of view that was not often heard in those outlets. I think that's really important, especially in a swing state like Wisconsin. We're not going to win with just Democrats, right?
So reproductive rights has been at the forefront. That's a major issue for you. What would you say are the other biggest issues facing Wisconsinites?
Definitely public schools. We have to increase the quality of our public schools, which requires money, right? Our property taxes are way too high, and it's a terrible, inequitable way to fund public education. So the state has to fund its commitment to public schools to take the property tax burden off of homeowners and renters. And we've got to bring this private, unaccountable voucher scheme to a responsible end. I am the only candidate in the race that has a plan for how we can end this responsibly.
Oh, can you say more about that?
Sure. And I'll just say, the last thing is obviously affordability. It's raising wages and lowering costs on those big ticket items. Those are the big issues. On vouchers, I think step one is requiring accountability, transparency, and non-discrimination. Basically, the same standards that public schools are held to. If you're taking $1 of public money, we need to have that be transparent. And you don't get to cherry pick your kids anymore. No more kicking out kids because they're disabled or firing teachers because they're gay. Step two deals with the statewide expansion of vouchers. So everything that isn't Milwaukee and Racine. The vast majority of those students were already enrolled in private school at their parents' expense before the state started picking up the tab. So my plan will say at the beginning of the next school year, after I take office, September of 2027, we will no longer be picking up the tab. That will be on parents to once again resume paying for private education if they want their kids in private, generally religious schools. Now, for Milwaukee and Racine, that's a different situation because a much greater percentage of students are enrolled in voucher schools, and the public schools simply do not have the capacity to handle that overnight. And the majority of the kids who are using vouchers are low income. So it would be extremely disruptive and counterproductive to their educations to make them move schools. So my plan will not make any kid move schools in Milwaukee and Racine. Instead, they will be allowed to continue their education until they're complete, and their siblings will be able to do that as well. But over time, we will increase the quality and the capacity of public schools in Milwaukee and Racine, and we will give those remaining voucher schools, which remember are going to be held to the same standard as public schools, but we'll give them the opportunity to convert, if they would like to, into public instrumentality charters if they want to continue receiving public funds.
So it sounds like that's a big issue, the voucher school revamp. You're calling for some updates there to that system and the complexity and nuance that not across the board, but different areas need different treatments.
And to be clear, not just a revamp, but actually bringing it to an end responsibly.
Sure.
Because there are candidates who do not see that they want to bring it to an end, right? They might want to tinker a little bit around the edges. And so this is a big policy differentiator between me and other candidates like Rodriguez, for instance.
Well, you mentioned affordability. Like that is top of mind for everyone, right? So inflation, the rising cost of living, there's no denying it's a tough time. And earlier this year, in a rare move, Governor Tony Evers and Republican legislative leaders came forward with a surplus spending deal that would have provided property tax relief, direct payments to Wisconsin taxpayers, and funding for education in the state. Ultimately, that proposal died in the legislature. You came out, though, as an early critic of this deal. So did many of the other gubernatorial competitors. With that said, a May 2026 Marquette Law School poll found 80% of Wisconsin adults say the state house should have passed that bill. I saw you put your hand up. Do you still feel you're in opposition to it? You have thoughts, you have feelings.
I have a lot of thoughts about this. And I have to say, it was, this is an area where not having as much media covering the Capitol regularly really hurts Wisconsinites. This bill would have been a disaster for our state. Had it passed, we would have taken an estimated $500 million surplus and turn it into a $2.9 billion deficit at the end of the next budget. Guess what we would have to cut if we had a $2.9 billion deficit? Literally everything we care about: public education, healthcare, Medicaid, food assistance, right? Everything important. I was in the state assembly. It was my very first term in 2009 when we were dealing with the Bush recession. The state budget did not have the flexibility to absorb that economic shock. And so the first thing we had to do as Democrats in control, for the first time in 24 years, we had a Democratic trifecta. And you know what we had to do? Pass a budget repair bill to fund state government from January till June. And then in the actual budget, we had to make devastating cuts. We furloughed state employees. I am never going to put the state in that kind of a catastrophic fiscal position. And I'm damn sure not going to do it as part of a political ploy by Robin Voss to try to protect his majority. This was a win-win deal for him because the surplus doesn't exist yet. It's not money sitting in a checking account unused. It is a projection of what the state might have a year from now as we go into the following state budget, if all goes well. That projection was made in January of this year. I don't know, Bianca, anything happen major on like a global scale that might affect the economy between January and now?
Yeah,
maybe
the Strait of Hormuz.
War in Iran, gas prices going crazy. And also, by the way, we still do have this crazy, chaotic president at the helm and Tom Tiffany rubber stamping him left and right. So there's more economic damage that could come. I'm not really feeling bullish on gambling the state's future based on a surplus projection that was done before the war in Iran. In addition, we have not paid our bills. That surplus, whatever surplus ends up materializing, rightly belongs to our kids because our schools have been underfunded for 8 Republican budgets in a row. $0 for early childhood education. We have taken $1 billion out of the universities of Wisconsin. We never expanded Medicaid, right? On issue after issue, we have not paid our bills to local governments. Republicans just killed the stewardship fund, the Knowles Nelson Conservation Program, right? So there's a lot of unmet needs that we would need to consider before handing out pre-election bribes to voters that are going to make it impossible for us to solve these long-term challenges.
Well, hey, you said it. You laid it out.
People don't always like that. And I get it. I mean, the easiest thing in the world would have been for me to just say, hey, I'm on the ballot August 11th. I want these people's votes. Wouldn't it be easier for me to take a victory lap and say, oh, I did all this great stuff. I'm going to pat myself on the back. Vote for me. But that would have been wrong. And leadership means doing the right thing, even when it's hard, and maybe especially when it's hard. And this was a tough vote politically, but I am really proud of my Democratic colleagues that we stood together and said, no, we are going to make the hard but the responsible right choice for our state's economic future.
Well, you mentioned Tom Tiffany. If you were to win the primary, your expected opponent on the Republican side of the ticket would be that frontrunner, U.S. Representative Tom Tiffany. To note that race is a competitive primary as well, with 27-year-old medical services technician Andy Mansky. He is also running. But Tiffany has received a serious endorsement from President Donald Trump, and the Republican Party has corralled behind him. Do you have a plan for how you would beat Tiffany if you win this Democratic primary?
Absolutely, yes. We need to aggressively campaign to hold Tom Tiffany to account for his record. Tom Tiffany is not his own man. He's Donald Trump's man. And at every turn, Tom Tiffany has chosen Donald Trump over Wisconsinites. In the illegal tariffs that are bankrupting our farmers and our small businesses, in the devastating healthcare cuts and SNAP cuts. Meanwhile, he funds Trump's ballroom, turning a blind eye to Trump's corruption. Tom Tiffany is a climate denier. He is an election denier. And the first thing that Tom Tiffany did when Wisconsinites gave him the honor of their votes is he came down to Madison and voted to defund public schools and attack our teachers. I know that history because I was there. The difference between me and Tom Tiffany isn't just our policies, right? It's that he's not his own man and I'm an independent thinker. Time and again, Bianca, I have not only stood up for my democratic progressive values, but been willing to stand up to my fellow Democrats when I felt like they were wrong, as in this budget surplus deal. And I think having that willingness to think for yourself is essential. And I think Wisconsinites value that, especially in a governor. And that is something that I can offer in strong contrast to Tom Tiffany. And by the way, he does support a national abortion ban, and I will defend reproductive freedom until my dying day.
Well, Kelda, we like to have fun on CityCast Madison. And so I want to throw like a fun question at you. I know this has all been fun because you're a Politico, right?
Exactly. This was fun. This is great.
Yeah, this has been fun. This has been fun. But just in the sense of, Wisconsin's governor, what do you love about Wisconsin? You can focus on Madison or anything like across the state. Like what gives you Wisconsin cred? What do you love about our state?
I mean, so much. I love alcoholic milkshakes, I will say. I love a good supper club, pink squirrel or grasshopper or mudslide. And I love cold water swimming. So you will definitely find me jumping in the water. It's like a joke with my campaign staff that you better bring a swimsuit and towel because if there's a lake and it's 9:00 and Kelda's done with whatever event, she's jumping in the water.
Oh my gosh, I adore both of those so much. Well, before I let you go, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
This is such a high stakes election for us. We have got to make sure we have our most effective, experienced fighter at the helm, somebody who knows how to use power and is not afraid to do it. We can win this election. We can win the state assembly, but we've got to have a strong candidate coming out. And I am proud to have built the broadest coalition of support of any candidate in this race. I have the most endorsements. I have the backing of WEAC, our state teachers union, who trust me as the public education champion, and the support of so many folks like Lieutenant Governor Barbara Lawton, a progressive champion, who said that I am the candidate that can beat Tom Tiffany, that actually is ready to govern on day one and brings the fearlessness that we need in this really perilous, high-stakes moment.
Senator Kelda Roys, thank you so much for joining the podcast. This has been really enlightening.
Thanks, Bianca.
That's Wisconsin State Senator Kelda Roys. She's running for governor of Wisconsin. That's all for today. Here on CityCast Madison, I'm your host, Bianca Martin. Don't forget, you can support the show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Madison neighbor at membership.citycast.fm/Madison. And hey, if you enjoyed the show, why not share this episode with someone who wants to vote in this governor election, as well as, anyone who likes a Brandy Alexander. All right, y'all. Help spread the word about CityCast Madison and this conversation. Share it out. Thank you so much. And we will be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, take good care and thanks for listening.